How's it going, my friends? Let's just continue with the book. So, studying politics scientifically. The idea that governing a state is like steering a ship is so marvelously seductive that it dominated modern politics. The metaphor has spread into discussions of purposes, policies, strategies, programs, and other bits of terminology, suggesting that there is a we that can determine the future of vast and complex societies. Parties at election times compete for votes with promises of benefits, while experience shows that problems are solved, if solved they ever are, only at the cost of creating new ones. This is no doubt the human condition, that within that condition we may perhaps have a limited choice between facing our problems as individuals or as collectivities. Some dream of political salvation from the injustice we suffer, while many echo Alexander Pope's statement of the opposite position. For forms of government, let full contest whenever its best administered is best. If governing a state is like steering a ship, however, what we need are reliable facts and sound explanation on how the vessel works. The place to find this is widely believed is in science. So far we looked at the history of politics and we turn our attention to ways in which it is experienced. Let us now move from history and practice to science. The important thing to realize is that seeing politics scientifically requires a complete change of perspective. The way we experience politics is a drama of character, convention, and circumstance. Political science requires that we forget about individual differences and construct politics over time as a process, analogous to what happens in nature. We have seen that the ancients did this by detecting the cross-generational cycles in the movement of politics. A powerful idea even today, and one used to great effect by Machiavelli. Religion, he remarked, brought forth good institutions, and good institutions led to good fortune, and from good fortune came felicitous success of the city undertakings. He followed Polybius and other ancient writers in arguing that each constitution collapses from its inherited defects. Such cycles are only marginally affected by individual qualities of those involved. He does note, however, that many such cycles never complete themselves because weaknesses caused by disorder in a state makes it prey to conquest by neighbors who are outside the system within which the cycle is working itself out. The idea of a system that is a set of mechanical components having a fixed relation to each other is central to conceiving of politics scientifically. A car engine is an example of such system. When a car breaks down, a mechanic may be able to fix it. We often think of an economy as a piece of machinery whose outcomes an outside intelligence such as government can direct, rather as if the government were the owner of a car and wanted to enhance its performance or increase its gearing. Here then we have another of those dominant metaphors by which politics is understood. Not a body this time, not a ship, but a mechanism. The politician is engineering a mechanic outside the system, trying to make the machinery work the way we want. We must distinguish too between what is internal to the system, which is the current technical language is called endogenous, and what is influenced from the outside, which is similarly called exogenous. The metaphor underlines political science. We must distinguish too between what is internal to the system, which in the current technical language is called endogenous, and what influences it from the outside, which is similarly called exogenous. This metaphor underlines political science. The science element consists in the intent to understand politics as a process or mechanism. And closely related, it is a technological ambition to use such knowledge to achieve our ends. One difficulty in conceiving of politics in this way is deciding on the boundaries between the endogenous and the exogenous, where, in other words, does the system end and the outside manipulative intelligence begin. When Charles de Gaulle intervened in French politics in 1958, for example, and set up a whole new constitution or system in the form of the Fifth Republic, was he a deus ex machina outside that system, or was he part of the wider system constituted by the tradition of French politics? The answer is, of course, that it all depends on the rules of the intellectual game of understanding being played. The American founding fathers can be regarded as setting up a system of rules within which their successors have operated. When we deliberate about something, we must ourselves be free and outside any system. But when other people deliberate about us, they take us as having fixed and more or less predictable characteristics within that system of understanding. It is a current philosophical cliché to insist that no one can escape the determining system constituted by race, gender, class, history, or other abstractions, and in one sense this is obviously true, but it would only be an interesting truth if the systems constituted by race, gender, class, and history could tell us how people are going to act. Since it cannot, we're left with a vacuous determinism. We can't escape whatever it is that we can't escape. Political science rests then on foundation best understood in terms of the metaphor of engineering. It also rests among rhetoric, which contrasts image, stereotype, fiction, myth, and the term rhetoric itself with fact, evidence, reality, and other such hard, gritty, impressive terms. Building on these foundations, political science used its materials to construct a grand edifice of theory, and today such materials. The political scientist first appears before us as a proprietor of bottomless mine of data. Data is, the Latin plural has become collective singular, the set of facts which can be used to construct and test the theories. The whole history can be melted down to provide one kind of data for the political scientist, advancing theory of, for example, revolutions. The modern world may also be defined as progressive intoxication with data. Civil servants collect it, statisticians refine it, and computers store it. The political science is in danger of becoming like those generals whose intelligence is so vast that the plan and timing of the enemy attack are known but unrecognized because so much other information is floating in the headquarters. A vote is a piece of data, and so is the answer to a pollster's question, and all over the world the volume of this kind of information is expanding exponentially. Votes and opinions only become data, however, if turned into abstractions constituted by the limited choice offered in the election, or the answer to the pollster's question. Data begins in homogenization and must always, in the end, defeat the many ingenious attempts which are made to incorporate complexities such as the degree of enthusiasm of the voter or the qualifications of the respondent. It is not just that such complexities are not in principle capable of being turned into data. It is rather that the relevant information is not always consciously available to the respondent at the moment of response. Human beings are more than the compositions of conclusions held with variety degrees of intensity. Human beings are more than the compositions of conclusions held with varying degrees of intensity. Politics, as the political scientist sees it, then systems thicken with data, and the aim is to find causal connections between them. In this search of analysis of modern societies into distinctive associations, which is an invaluable framework of thought, but also one which threatens to destroy political science itself, for it causes of what happens in politics are to be found in the economy or social progress or even culture, then politics is merely a set of effects and loses its autonomy as a free and self-determining activity. One consequence would be that there is nothing in politics for a scientist to study. Politics is in fact autonomous, though it is obviously closely related to other human activities and structures. The basic questions in political science is what causes such and such political phenomenon? Why, for example, do governments sometimes win elections and sometimes lose them? It may be possible to find part of the answer to these questions within politics itself. Why, for example, do governments sometimes win elections and sometimes lose them? It may be possible to find part of the answer to this question within politics itself, for example, in the superior party organization of the winner. But what often appeals to political scientists as a more profound explanation will be an explanation outside politics altogether, in, for example, the apparently separate thing called the economy. One simple hypothesis of this kind has been governments get re-elected if the election is held on a rising curve of the trade cycle. If this were in fact true, it will illustrate the maxim that knowledge is power. All the government needs to do to win an election is to engineer a boom as the election approaches. The two obvious problems are, first, that the economy is not a domesticated pet which will do what is told. Second, as it happens, that the hypothesis is in any case false. As is common in political science, the correlation is interesting, but the causal nexus is feeble, even though the elements of the relationship, the customer and the voter, are unified by being the same person. There is a further problem which can be illustrated by one of the early projects of creating a political science in its modern form. At the turn of the 20th century, the first wave of academic political scientists attacked some of their theoretical predecessors for the supposed mistake of assuming that human beings were entirely rational. This mistake had allegedly been made by politicians and theorists who have tried to appeal. There is a further problem which can be illustrated by one of the early projects of creating a political science in its modern form. At the turn of the 20th century, the first wave of academic political scientists attacked some of their theoretical predecessors for the supposed mistake of assuming that human beings were entirely rational. These mistakes had allegedly been made by politicians and theorists who had tried to appeal to voters in terms of purely rational argument. The new political scientists triumphantly pointed out that image stereotypes, the emotions arising in crowds, family background, and many other irrational factors were actually the main determinants of political behavior. This is very interesting. As often happens in such critical interactions in academic life, the two sides were to some extent at cross purposes, the new political scientists taking for the factual assumption what was actually normative argument designed to elicit more rationality to political policy. Even more fundamental than critic and criticize being at that cross purpose is the fact that the project of political science is limited by having to assume that human conduct is essentially non-rational. Science turns whatever it studies into natural processes which is not affected by thinking, because thought is the capacity to construct the world in a variety of ways, and how human beings act depends on these unpredictable constructions. Human conduct thus lacks even the regularity found in a natural world. The observation that governments often win elections which are held on a rising high level of prosperity, for example, can be turned into something like a causal hypothesis that citizens happy with this condition tend to vote for the incumbent government. But it is because human beings are reflective and the world can be seen in many other ways besides that of prosperity or its absence, and the hypothesis lacks real force. There are, however, a variety of different forms of irrational human behavior as it is studied by separate decision makers choosing strategies in what are misleadingly called games. The question asked by rational choice theorists is, under what condition is it rational to choose a strategy of cooperation with others, paying for public goods such as parks or defense, for example, as against what, on this assumption, is the most immediately obvious rational strategy, that of pursuing one's individual advantage and being a free rider on what others have paid for. The issues are often analyzed on the basis of the famous prisoner dilemma, in which two prisoners kept incommunicated by the sheriff must decide on their strategies. The conditions are that if A confesses and B does not, then A gets off with a light sentence and B a heavy one. If B confesses, it will be he who gets off lightly and A who will not. If they both confess, they will both get quite a heavy sentence. If, however, they trust each other and neither confesses, both will get the lightest sentence of all. Trust is thus, in this game as in life, risky, but it can also have the greatest payoff. It is remarkable how extensively this unlikely structure can be formalized to cover everything from the foundation of states to international relations and the provisions of public spaces. Hey guys, so I think there's a lot to digest here. So what I'm doing is I'm just gonna focus on one question. Under what conditions it is rational to choose a strategy of cooperation with others, like paying for public goods such as a park? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write the question below on the box, like that text box, so that you guys answer it. And I'm just gonna stick with that. And for you guys who wanna like keep on exploring the chapter, like you can do it on your own time. But I just wanna make sure we cover most of the basic stuff. So let's just continue, because I feel like this could make a whole chapter. Just trying to explain these ideas. These axiomatics of choice have generated a large and impressive technical literature. What illustrates is the propensity of political science to become colonized by economists, for the agents theorized in this way are basically economic actors. And this is a fact which explains what might well be seen to a reader a contradiction of our argument. We have argued that political science can only understand human beings as irrational, mere responders to stimuli, yet here in rational choice theory we have a form of political science which explores the choices of rational agents. Surely then political science can accommodate rationality? We have argued that political science can only understand human beings as irrational, mere responders to stimuli. Yet here, in rational choice theory, we have a form of political science which explores the choices of rational agents. Surely then, political science can accommodate rationality? The crux of this matter lies in what we mean by rational. We need not here go into the distinction between the concepts of reason in classical philosophy and on one hand and significantly different instrumental rationality of actual economic actors on the other. All we need to observe is that when human beings act, they seek both to realize a desire which impels the action and also to express itself in conserving a chosen identity. Rational choice theory can in limited way turn the first element into a formula by quantifying and ordering preferences, but it cannot deal with the other element of action, and it is particularly the case in politics, and less so in economics, that this element of our conduct is especially prominent. Critics of rational choice theory have been especially savage in attacking its blindness to the way in which people of different cultures conduct themselves. Rational choice theory can, in limited way, turn to the first element into a formula by quantifying and ordering preferences, but it cannot deal with the second element, with the other element of action, and it is particularly the case in politics, and less so in economics, that this element of our conduct is especially prominent. Critics of rational choice theory have been especially savage in attacking its blindness to the way in which people of different cultures conduct themselves. The scientific study of politics is then a great but limited achievement of our century. Like any other form of understanding, it gains its power from its limitation, but it happens that the specific limitations of science, in its fullest sense, are especially restrictive in the understanding of human life. But political science often escapes this limitation by ignoring the strict requirements of science as a discipline. Much of its material is historical and descriptive. Indeed, it must be fair to recognize that any understanding of the government of modern states cannot be separated from the culture of the people who live in them. Alright guys, so it's a really interesting topic, and it touches on political economy, and I really want to explore that topic of political economy in the future. So I hope you guys can explain the whole rational choice theory. I have more or less an idea, but it's the idea that humans are irrational, therefore trying to make a scientific model to quantify and to predict human behavior is difficult, as we've seen in sometimes opinion polls and sometimes statistics, like they don't work. Like people might say one thing and do something else. So this unpredictability makes it harder to quantify. And as we see, science is all about, for those of you guys who study a bit of philosophy of science, it's about having very strict requirements, and in most of those studies things are restricted in order to demonstrate something. So in an empirical model, we have to have a lot of conditions which need to be satisfied for something to be asserted. So it seems that applying something like that to political science might be slightly harder. That is why it's a social science and not a natural science.